on a day-to-day basis, the whole development cycle of AI is very, very complicated, because every time you need to figure out, okay, is it good enough? Is it good enough? What element do I need to improve on it? But even that test of whether it's good enough is hard.
In the world of technology, heroes are everywhere. They're overcoming disruption, delivering sustainable outcomes, and fearlessly forging the future to solve what's next. Join me, Ed McNamara, as we meet the people and businesses driving change in our constantly disruptive world. This is Innovation Heroes, a podcast brought to you by SHI. Think about the everyday ways AI has changed our lives, from turning speech into text to managing our daily schedules. But in today's episode, we're going to see how AI is being used to save lives. I'm joined by Peter Kecskemethy, the CEO and co-founder of Kheiron Medical, and Sarah Kerruish, their Chief Strategy Officer. They're here to share their journey of how Kheiron Medical's talented deep learning team developed an AI technology to improve breast cancer screenings so that patients can experience improved health outcomes through earlier detection. We'll dive into the technology, the real-world impact it's having, and what the future holds for AI in medicine. Peter and Sarah, welcome to Innovation Heroes.
Thank you so much, Ed.
Very nice.
And thanks for being here. Peter, can you share a bit about your background and what inspired you to co-found Kheiron Medical?
Yes, and thanks again for having us. I had a pretty long journey towards this. Actually, my background is technical, AI, software engineering, computer science, high performance computing and stats, and population genetics. But I think the most important part of the background for this is my mom's a radiologist. And I actually spent most of my childhood sort of like after school hours, etc., in radiology departments. And I would say where Kheiron comes from is the recognition that AI and generally computer science and AI are extremely powerful in producing tools for doctors, and also the recognition that in healthcare, it's not just the patients who suffer, but a lot of times the doctors as well. You often see the doctor having extremely unsuitable software that they need to use at their work sort of all day, and they get out of the hospital and they have the most sophisticated software and algorithms recommending various movies or restaurants to go to. So I think what we need to do, and what Kheiron comes from, is bringing the best possible tools to doctors. And I do believe that AI is one of the most important piece of technologies to produce those tools. And since doctors are helping patients and are absolutely on the front lines of saving lives, this way, I think this is one of the best ways innovation, especially tech, software engineering can save lives.
And Peter, we're one question in, and I'm going, somewhat off script already, but it just brought to mind in terms of like all of the trainings and the years of practice that doctors have and radiologists. I mean, how much of that is computer training, and how big of a gap could there be from knowledge of, perfecting their craft in terms of treating patients the way that they do versus the technology that they use? Like, is there one?
I think it depends on the field for sure. And as I see, radiology has always been on the forefront of adopting really somewhat esoteric, but extremely frontline technologies. Like if you think about the X-ray and then computer tomography and now MRI, which is extremely high level of technology. Then digitization in the hospital, a lot of that was driven in by radiologists. And I do believe AI is one of the, radiology is also one of the most natural areas to adopt AI, especially image recognition systems.
Excellent. And Sarah, you've had an amazing career as a journalist and a filmmaker. What brought you to Kheiron Medical, and how do you define your role as Chief Strategy Officer?
That's good questions. So I started out in media, as you said, in filmmaking, and I was invited to go and make a film of a company called General Magic in Silicon Valley many, many years ago. And that was my introduction to the world of tech. But I very quickly became interested in how you use technology and software and hardware to bring important ideas to life. And I was very privileged to work with some incredible people, some of the big innovators of our age. And, from them, I learned a tremendous amount and thought this is something that I want to spend my life doing. And in particular, I'm very interested in how technology can be applied in healthcare and in the field of cancer. And to, your earlier point, doctors, when you have a scan, when you have a suspicious mass or there's something wrong and you have a scan, you sort of expect that the doctor will look at that and go, oh, this is a very specific kind of cancer. It's a 2 millimeter something oma. But actually, cancer detection is a really difficult task, even for the most experienced doctors. And that's where AI can really add a lot of value. So when I was introduced to Kheiron and, this incredible team of machine learning world experts, and Peter, who really understood the pain points of doctors, it seemed to me that that was the right formula for creating a technology like the one we've created called Mia to really help doctors with that very difficult task of detecting cancer earlier. And as it relates to your question about chief strategy officer, the way I see that is really, Peter leads on strategy, but I'm sort of his right arm. And we look together for areas of the business where we can have the most meaningful growth. And depending on the stage of the business, that can be different stages. But it's things like, for us, creating academic partnerships, working to develop relationships with organizations like the NHS or big partners in the US, so that we can test and develop the technology and make sure that it's working for the women that we are hoping to help.
And Sarah, I think that, in terms of developing partnerships, I was reading, and I'm consulting my notes now. Your company has experts and engineers that you're partnered with that were from Oxford, Cambridge, McGill, KTH University, KTH, University College London, Imperial College. From a recruiting perspective, I'd imagine that makes a pretty attractive place for people on the cutting edge to want to come to work. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I think that we've definitely attracted incredible talent. And the most special thing, though, about the people that we work with is not the illustrious universities they went to, although they did, or the incredible science that they develop, or the AI that they develop and test. It's really the mission. And we have a team that's so dedicated to this mission of finding cancer earlier. And as you probably know, if you detect cancer earlier, in our case breast cancer, that can mean an entirely different prognosis. So you're not looking at necessarily radiation or mastectomies. You're potentially looking just at lumpectomies and maybe some radiation, but possibly not chemotherapy. So, we're hearing now from the women whose cancers were picked up earlier by Mia, which is our technology. And it's just the greatest privilege of our lives to know that there are many women now walking out in the world whose cancer was picked up earlier by our technology and who have a better prognosis as a result.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's time to talk about that technology. Kheiron's medical AI technology, Mia, as you said, Sarah, it's quite innovative. Peter, maybe could you explain what sets your AI-driven diagnostics apart in the fight against cancer?
Yeah, so first of all, our number one sort of flagship product or AI service is called Mia, is for breast cancer screening. Very specifically. It is based on image processing or AI, the arm or the part of AI or the type of AI that is working with image inputs. So basically, the radiologists are producing the images, or the hospitals are producing the images that radiologists look at. The AI also looks at it. And pretty much attempts to make the same decision. However, the AI has very different capabilities. So the AI is infinitely diligent. It looks at every single pixel, while the humans don't do that. But the AI doesn't have the same strategic overview or contextual background understanding that the trained doctor does. So what we optimized for is twofold. One, for the AI to be useful, so really being as complementary as possible, so additive, try to bring all the capabilities that is hard for humans, but not try to replicate the capability that humans have. So we're not trying to imitate how doctors make the decisions, but bring in extra information that is, for instance, not visible to the human eye or sort of not accessible to the brain, the visual cortex of how humans process images. So that's how we combine the two capabilities is one, and a focus on that is one of the ways that I think our approach is very different, and that is through both in terms of what the AI looks at, information it processes, and also how it collaborates with the doctors. And how it collaborates with the doctors is through various workflows, and it's different in the US than in Europe. So that's one aspect, and the other aspect is for the AI to be working. And like I'm sure everyone thinks when they develop a piece of AI, they believe it works, but actually assessing whether AI works or not is extremely complicated. It requires statistical thinking, and it's a completely new paradigm. Like we never had a kind of tool. Humanity never had a tool like this before, when it's hard to assess whether the tool works or not. Like if you have a piece of hardware, like a knife, you could figure out whether that cuts or not. You have a piece of software, you know what it's supposed to do, and you test it, and then you know whether it works or not. For AI, it's extremely hard because it is trained on a set of images, for instance, a set of inputs, and then it's assessed on similar but fundamentally different inputs. And that's when if it can perform well on those unseen cases, that's when it works. But what if a case is too unseen? Like it sees it not like a breast mammogram, but like a chest X-ray, then of course it shouldn't work. But what if it is a mammogram for breast cancer screening, but it's not for like a lady from Europe, but a lady from Southeast Asia? Like you would expect it still should work, right? So that exact level of specialism and generalizability needs to be gotten right. But as it happens, it's fundamentally impossible to prove, extremely hard to test, and takes a lot of effort. And but that kind of testing has to be a fundamental part of how AI is being developed. So you can imagine that it's on a day-to-day basis, the whole development cycle of AI is very, very complicated, because every time you need to figure out, okay, is it good enough? Is it good enough? What element do I need to improve on it? But even that test of whether it's good enough is hard. So that is a very involved technical and statistical and scientific task. And taking that seriously, that task, to a level that I haven't seen from others, is what I think also sets us apart. So basically, being useful, bringing AI capability beyond human capability, and making sure it works.
And I'm just putting myself in the shoes of the patient for a second, to put myself in the shoes of anybody that has to make a phone call to a patient that could be, either the best or worst phone call that they might ever receive, right? I mean, you really don't want to be chasing, I'll say chasing ghosts. That's a layman's terms or something, but you really want to be sure of the data, and it's just such an amazingly sensitive topic. And Sarah, the way that you described the company before, it just sounds like pretty much everyone at Kheiron's going to have that kind of sensitivity because of, at the end of the day, we're talking technology, but there's real, life-changing conversations that are happening as a result of the technology. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I can tell you about one of those conversations. I think the first thing that's important to note is that Mia never makes the decision in isolation. So Mia will make a recommendation as to whether a woman should be recalled for further testing or not. But ultimately, it's the doctors that decide, and that's very much our worldview, that Mia and tech AI should be complementary to doctors' decision making. So that's the first thing. And then in terms of the actual conversation itself, we have one wonderful patient who was involved in a study we did in Scotland. And when she was told about her very small mass in her breast that was in fact a cancer, post-biopsy, they knew that it was a cancer. She said, I don't have the big C, I have a little c. And so that conversation's never an easy conversation, but we want more of those little c conversations. And my ultimate dream is that in 5-10 years, that when somebody calls you to say, hey, we've done further testing, we think you've got cancer, or we know that you have cancer, I want people to have that feeling of like, oh, that's a bummer, but it's not the am I going to die? And I think there's been so much advance in therapeutics, but not so much in diagnostics. And I think that's where AI is playing a really critical role. And the combination of those two things is really going to transform cancer and the very meaning of the word, I think.
And Sarah, earlier you mentioned, early detection and the impact in early detection. How is Kheiron's technology improve the accuracy and efficiency of breast cancer screening in real-world healthcare settings?
Well, that's been the part that's so unbelievably exciting, because we did our first prospective real-world study in Hungary, and we saw extraordinary results there. So, up to 15% of increased cancer detection. And that was so groundbreaking that it was reported on the front page of the New York Times. One of the first real-world examples of AI actually being used in clinical practice and having, extraordinarily good results beyond our expectations. Those results we've reproduced in the UK. They were published recently in the BBC, and again made global headlines, because we're just beginning to see that, our technology and technologies like ours really will make huge differences in the accuracy and the ability of doctors to detect cancer earlier, and in many cases years earlier. And we're projecting that in breast cancer screening, 20% of cancers are missed routinely, because it's such a difficult task. It's not like doctors aren't doing their job. It's just very difficult to see and detect breast cancer. And we think, based on the stats we're seeing now, that MIA will halve that rate of missed cancers. And what that translates into is 2,000 women a year in the UK, 40,000 in the US. These are big numbers and very meaningful impact that we hope to have.
And I guess from a technology perspective, Peter, it's been just under 20 years since you studied AI and cybermetrics at the University of Reading, and just under 9 since you were co-founder of Kheiron Medical. What's changed most about the AI technology since you first started? Not just your development of it, but the actual capabilities in, let's say, 9 years since you founded the company.
Yeah, I think actually the last, I would say, 11 years is the big deep learning AI revolution, when it has been shown and proven that AI can be extremely accurate, especially the new novel AI algorithms, these deep learning convolutional neural networks, as they call it, with GPUs, so graphical processing units, that are normally used for gaming but now are used for AI. Right. The combination of that about 11 years ago and a proven their proof for image processing is, I think, the hallmark of the starting of this process of AI actually proving itself. Interestingly enough, the technology, or sort of the methods that we use now, were already in the 60s, but were not used because the computing power wasn't there. So the development and the real honing of the technology was not possible at the time. But now, with good computing capability, that became a reality. And since that, I think, like even 2016, so basically 3-4 years after the advent of the success of deep learning, we've seen that it is becoming better at tasks, very specific, well-defined tasks. It can get better than humans can. But the most important thing is that we do see that it acts differently. And I think seeing that, both the strengths and the weaknesses of it is, and the more and more precise understanding of that over the years, is what I think is propelling the field forward. So I do believe that right now, it's not actually what algorithm do we use is really the question. The question is, how do we use it? Like, what input do we give the algorithms in terms of not just for training, but on everyday data? Like, do we want to pre-process what we give it, or do we not want to pre-process? I think people have experience with that with ChatGPT. If you have a different prompt, you get a very different answer. But also understanding the limitations of, okay, which part do I believe and which part do I not believe for the AI? And I think what is becoming more and more clear is that in critical use cases like medicine or security or some other aspects, when life and death questions are really asked, how do we, like, assessing the reliability of the software? So basically monitoring whether I should still trust the AI, or has it learned something that I did not intend it to learn? I think those are the new questions. So it's not really the algorithm itself, but everything around it. Like, how do we integrate that into our into everyday usage for real world usage. And for medical, I think that's extremely critical. That's where the front of the field is, sort of like the front lines, to make sure that the software works when we bring it to a new hospital, if for breast cancer screening specifically, and make sure that it works in the second month and the third month and the sixth month and like the second year, not just on the first week when we installed it. And I think that intense monitoring and the capabilities, the scientific technical capabilities around that is where I see that the most important next steps need to be taken, and that's exactly where we're putting our efforts in right now.
Excellent. I mean, it seems pretty clear. I'm pretty confident about the technology. So, Sarah, I kind of wanted to turn to you for a second. Since joining Kheiron, like, what are some of the key initiatives or strategies you've implemented that have helped shape the company's direction since you've joined?
Well, we've talked a little bit about the importance of the clinical trials and the studies and the academic partners and the KOLs. But one of the things I'm most proud of, actually, that we've done is really brought the patient voice in throughout everything we've done. We have a patient advisory board, incredible women and one man, who advises from everything about what we call the product, how we invite women to screening, how we think about describing AI to women in the context of their screening, and the insights and the joy, the pure joy, actually, of just getting together with these women and their excitement about what we're doing. I think that's been, for me, one of the greatest privileges. And then I would say the other thing is, it's been really humbling, the amount of coverage, press coverage we've gotten. And I think that's something that, obviously the clinical trial results are very, very exciting. And we have a whole bunch more coming out now. And I can't remember actually ever being so excited professionally to share this news with the world when we can. But it's been very gratifying that this has been picked up, that people are starting to understand the importance of AI and technology in cancer and what this kind of technology can do. So I think the fact that the word is spreading and that the media pickup has been all over the world has been very, very encouraging. And I think lays a foundation for what we really want to do in our ambition, which is to make sure that breast screening is improved for women all over the world. One of the things that we haven't talked about a lot, which is really important in AI, is eliminating bias. And in healthcare, that means making sure that Mia works for every woman. It doesn't matter where she comes from or her ethnicity. And, one of the studies that I can sort of hint at is a big study that proves how Mia works well for women from different ethnicities and doesn't increase healthcare inequality. So, I can't claim any credit for any of that work, but it's just this amazing team of scientists and AI specialists. But the results, it's just unbelievably gratifying. And no matter what happens next, I shall be proud of this work, till the end of my days.
That's fantastic. I mean, and I'm just thinking, like, the patient and the doctor, they just want to get to the right answer. I mean, are most patients even aware of the technology that got them to the right answer? And because to them, there's already bigger issues to be concerned with. But are they even aware of how they got there?
Yeah. Well, that's a really good question. Generally not. When you have any kind of test, the doctor doesn't say, hey, we use this kind of CAT scan or this kind of software, or the processing software, or any of that. And in fact, that's the women I was telling you about earlier. That was some of their feedback. They're like, we don't need to know that AI has read my scan. As long as the doctor's making the decision, we don't need to know the details. And I thought that was actually a very interesting insight for us. The only occasion really when women explicitly know is during the studies, and obviously then they're informed that Mia is going to be reading their scan in addition to doctors, and just giving them the option to opt out if they don't want to participate in the study. So in that case, there's full transparency and a lot of information given to women about, what's going to happen regarding their scan. And then, when they do get the results, if Mia has picked up a cancer, they have some context, and the doctor will explain then in that case that Mia flagged something that perhaps they hadn't seen originally. And that's what they want, and at that point, then they would do a biopsy.
And I'm just love the enthusiasm with which you speak of it, because and everybody at Kheiron knows, and I can tell that's, what's important to you guys, that they're getting, the answers that they need to get one way or another. Which kind of brings me to like future goals and expansion. Looking ahead, what are the next big goals for Kheiron Medical? Are there any plans to expand Mia or any other AI solution to other types of cancer screenings or diagnostics?
Yeah, our main focus is more and more becoming the United States. We had some great results in the UK and in Europe, and thankfully we can count the number of lives that we impacted. But specifically in the UK, we're kind of at an impasse. And the UK is forming its strategy. UK and National Health Services are forming their approaches on how to assess AI, and that's unfortunately preventing timely adoption. But we're seeing interest and quite a bit of momentum in the US. We can't speak about those very openly yet, but. I think in terms of the impact that we can have is I think we can impact about 2,000 women and their families who would probably have a late cancer detection without the software, and with the software most likely we can find those cancers earlier. And in the US, that number is actually probably over 40,000 if we extrapolate some of the results that we previously had. So if you think about 40,000 women and their families impacted across the U.S. every year. That's a pretty significant number. That's very exciting to work towards. And I think that's just the current state of the technology. If we improve the performance even further, the integrations and beyond, then that could be significantly improved even beyond. So if you think about can you have a more exciting piece of software technology that you just bring into a hospital, install it, and pretty much from next day, next week, you start helping doctors save lives. You can actually measure it, and it's just such an exciting and scalable thing to do in terms of human impact. I can't imagine any more exciting thing to work on.
And I can't help myself, and you could totally pass on this question if you want, but we're in full-scale election season here in the U.S. Is there any like non-technical, non-medical just hurdles that need to be reached, in terms of regulation or anything like that? Does any one geography lend itself to earlier or more thorough adoption of this technology somehow?
I think it's a really interesting question. And what we've seen is that there needs to be a new level of understanding among our politicians about both the opportunity and the risks with AI. And right now you hear actually quite a lot about the risks and the dangers, which are real, but less about the opportunities and how we, as quickly as possible, leverage the power of AI. And what Peter was referring to earlier in the NHS is that we've developed the technology, proven that it works for women all over the UK, but the policy hasn't caught up. So what I would say to Madam President Kamala Harris is to make that a core part of her administration, and to or whoever happens to be in the White House, to make it a core part of the administration, and making sure that they have task forces that really understand the opportunities, but also how you can accelerate the adoption of the technologies like Kheiron's, because we're solving really, really important problems, not just in terms of cancer detection, but saving physicians a lot of time. For example, in the UK, we're seeing that we can save, the context is that in the UK, two doctors read every mammogram, but with Mia, we can save that second reader something like 80% of the time required to read. So there's a lot of health economic savings, doctors' time savings, and patient lives saving. So I think, getting those people into political office that understand AI, the opportunities, the risks, and how to deploy and monitor it safely. And then, the benefits will be much more rapidly felt by, everybody in, wherever it is, the US, the UK, Canada, and hopefully sometime soon the rest of the world.
Innovation Heroes is proudly produced by SHI, a leading global IT solutions provider dedicated to making life simpler for business and IT professionals. For over 30 years, we've bridged the gap between digital strategy and execution, delivering cutting-edge technology and services to thousands of customers worldwide. Whether you're navigating the cloud, strengthening cybersecurity, or transforming your workplace, SHI is here to help. To learn more, visit shi.com/solvewhat'snext. That's shi.com/solvewhat'snext to embrace the future with stress-free, scalable solutions that you and your people will love. Yeah, I think you very eloquently said what we talk about on Innovation Heroes a lot is that lawmakers tend to not exactly early adopters when it comes to new technology or the regulations that come with it. So I was just kind of curious as to what you were facing, but that was a perfect answer. Which kind of brings me to just the advice for aspiring innovators. What advice would each of you give? Peter, we'll start with you. What advice would you give to innovators who are looking to leverage technology to tackle complex health challenges like cancer or any others that they may face?
Yeah, I think the list is extremely long on what needs to be what one needs to get right in order for innovation to be brought, especially into healthcare. There are lots of generalities. A lot of methodology has been developed over the last decade for innovation, like lean methodologies like lean startup and being able to have strong opinions weekly held, having an experimental mindset, learning as fast as possible, staying scrappy and lean and conservative on expenses. I think in the current economic environment is very, very important. But I think maybe the biggest advice above it all is to make sure that when we're innovating, we actually like our market and those we're innovating for, and we solve a problem. I see a lot that a piece of exciting technology is someone's excited about, and then they are trying to just bring in for whatever problem they can think of. But rather than focusing on solving a problem that someone has, a genuine problem, and really making the problem go away, it's more about obsession on the piece of technology. And I think for AI, it's even more of a even higher frequency than anything else. So I think focusing on problems, genuine problems to be solved that are worth solving, I think would probably be the number one thing that gets people to success. So would be my biggest recommendation, probably.
Sarah, how about you?
Yeah, I'm just going to add to that. I think, solve meaningful problems, because the kinds of work that we've been doing at Kheiron is really difficult and really demanding, and we've had lots of sleepless nights and scary moments, but ultimately incredibly rewarding. So I would say work on a big, important problem that's meaningful to you, as Peter said, but then I would say just never give up. I think I've been lucky to work with some amazing innovators, including the original Apple team. And the difference between those people who succeed and those who fail are the people who just keep going. And maybe it doesn't happen in this current iteration, maybe it happens in the next iteration, or maybe even the next one. But if it's something you really care deeply about that sort of keeps you awake and makes you want to keep trying and keep at it, just keep going. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what distinguishes those who succeed from those who fail. And
just listening to both of you talk in terms of collaboration, you just talk about it seamlessly, whether it's within your own team or whether it's with literally the teams that are out on the field on the front lines using your technologies. I mean, that collaboration's just got to be there, and you speak so easily to it. So it's just wanted to compliment you both. It sounds like a great environment, both for the work that you do, but also, it is a workplace, and it sounds awesome. So, kudos to you both for that.
It is.
But just wanted to say, thank you so much for being with me here today. For listeners interested, Sarah, maybe you could say, for listeners interested in learning more or maybe want to reach out to you directly or find out more about the company, what's the best place to find you?
Yeah, well, you can our website and send email inquiries via a website, or anyone's feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm Sarah at kheironmed.com. So we're always happy to speak to people who are interested in the field or who just want to talk about startups or an idea. As Hillary Clinton said, it takes a village, and we've been very lucky to work with some of the greats. And as you said, we have our own team that's amazing, but it's also nice to be able to support other people with their ideas.
Excellent. So in closing, just wanted to say today's discussion has highlighted the incredible potential of AI to change the face of healthcare as we know it. It's truly amazing to think that AI can be leveraged not just to detect cancer earlier, but to make it a manageable disease, the little c, as you said earlier, Sarah. And as we move forward, Kheiron Medical's work inspires us to think about how we can use technology to solve the most pressing issues in healthcare. A big thank you to Peter and Sarah for joining me today. Until next time, keep innovating.